And this is part 2 with Jim Simpson. Jim Simpson for Congress.com. And thank you for joining us, Mr. Simpson. And what else would you say about your social media and how people can reach you should they wish to make a contribution or contact you in your efforts to run for Congress?
Sure. Well, let me get back to my web page again.
Oh,
here it is.
good.
Can you see it now?
Yes, that's Jim Simpson for Congress.com. I see it there.
Okay. All right, so that's my website. Now, the most important thing anybody can do is go to that big red donate button up there at the top and hit that. And of course, you can pay by credit card online, or you can send a check to my campaign office, which is listed up here, 1810 J York Road in Lutherville, Maryland. And they would like to go to my Facebook page. I am at James Simpson is my regular Facebook page right here. And then I have a group page, for a Congress page. Here it is. Right. And that's Jim Simpson for Congress. And I post a lot of articles and things there. The webinar we did last Thursday is posted there. It's also posted at YouTube, where I have a Jim Simpson for Congress YouTube channel. So that's where people can go to connect with me, either on my campaign Facebook page or my regular Facebook page here. Either one or both. Go to the site, friend me, and there's a lot of good information I post on those on an almost daily, well, on a over daily basis. My friend Jeff Nyquist right here is being interviewed by Jamie Glazoff. Anyway, so that's that. And the most important thing, if you want to see people like me get elected, we need money. I can't put it any clearer than that. We need money. And I need to raise another, I hope to raise another $10,000 to $20,000 prior to the primary, which is coming up in about 3 weeks. And, you know, $20 donation by 500 people would get me there, would get me to $10,000, and that would almost guarantee that I win the primary. You know, these are the kind of unfortunate calculations we have to make. But if your viewers are in the position to do so, I urge them to please consider a donation of any amount, And so with that, I will quit the that page.
It seems crass to promote and ask for money. It seems almost perverse in terms of politics and being a public servant. However, the reality of where we find ourselves in our current the condition of our republic is that money is very much a factor. So to bring an intellectual to Congress, a person who's a writer and an intellectual and a researcher and a person who's capable of articulating conservative principles, bringing that person to Congress, it requires a little bit of sacrifice. So you have to put yourself on the metaphorical barricades of the of the revolution, as it were, to try to bring your voice to Congress. And you're also an avid supporter of President Trump's agenda.
That's right.
So anyone who wants to bring another voice to Congress, who's going to support our president in his efforts to fight against the squad and so forth, you're a person who they need to, if they give $10, we always say, hey, it's free to come to a program tonight. People end up reaching deep. They end up reaching into their wallet and contributing what they feel led to contribute. And it's always more than the $5 admission ticket that we would have charged to begin with. So, but I've always said to the Republicans here locally in Minnesota that if you had any ideas, you wouldn't need a lot of money. But you, Mr. Simpson, have loads of ideas, and you also need a little bit of money. So
thank you.
Let's hope that comes flowing in to you. It's JimSimpsonForCongress.com. And, where else, when we left off in the last segment, we were in 15-minute segment, we were talking about China's role in possibly spreading this around the world, and President Trump has spoken about eventually looking into that. Now's the time for securing our people and the safety of our communities, but eventually we'll want to move into identifying where this thing came from and why we're suffering through all of this. Who did this to us, right? And lots of Democrats don't want to examine that at all. They don't want to.
They don't. They don't want their friends to be embarrassed. That's what it is. That's literally what it is. They do not want their communist Chinese buddies, their fellow travelers, to be embarrassed. And it is embarrassing what they've done, killing of how many 100,000 people have died now across the country, across the world. That's kind of embarrassing. And, and then they're trying to blame everybody else. But the fact of the matter, here's the thing that you have to know about all communist systems. And this is why I can make the strong affirmative statement that was a bioweapon and it came from a bioweapons lab. That Wuhan lab, where it did come from, is very well known. It is also very well known to have issues with security. And it's been cited numerous times, and people have expressed concerns in the past that a dangerous virus or bacteria could leak out. And so here we are. But the other thing you have to always understand about a communist system, and this, you can say this absolutely affirmatively, make a blanket statement for every single communist nation in the world. If they're working on something for commercial or medical application, there is always a dual use component. Always. So they could have been looking for some kind of cure with the coronavirus by splicing this and splicing that and see what reacts. But while they're doing that, they are always seeking a way to consider how it can be used as a weapon, because essentially all communist nations are basically militarily offensive nations who are only peaceful at the moment because it's not in their interest to attack. And the way they choose to attack is the Sun Tzu manner, which is through deception, through misinformation, and to destroy their enemy without firing a shot.
And Sun Tzu has that tremendous capacity to always study the enemy. Right. Study. If you don't study the enemy, you've already lost the battle.
Right.
And the Chinese know us better than we know them.
And probably better than we know ourselves.
tremendous point to make,
Yeah.
because we don't seem to have much introspection and
No, we don't.
capacity to self-analyze
No,
in the
that's right.
U.S.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
lots of good feelings in the United States rather than a good knowledge base
Yeah,
of what our
exactly.
enemies are up to.
Exactly.
And we also don't think we have any enemies, which is kind of a pie in the sky way of looking at the world, isn't it?
Well, the
But,
left would like us to think that we don't have any enemies so that they can continue to conspire with our enemies without being noticed.
right. While
That's
playing
the
our
real.
own uh, high standards of ethics, they're playing that against us. So they fold it back against us in the culture. And I keep looking at these copies of the Epic Times, and the most recent one is I'm sort of changing the subject here, but the looming meat shortages expose vulnerable farm to store pipeline, which is in the newest edition of the Epic Times.
Yep.
And uh, China has been brilliant at, I'm just going to set these aside so I don't mention it again, but I love that newspaper. And you're a contributor and a writer in that newspaper. So,
It's a great newspaper. It really is, I think, one of the best print publications out there today. It really, really is good. In the webinar that we had last week, we had Mike Elmore, who is a Wyoming rancher, and I invited him to that webinar because most people just don't understand how sophisticated and how complicated the food supply chain issue is, especially when it comes to red meat and poultry.
oh
It's
boy.
extremely, and fish, everything
Mm.
depends on really razor thin timing with razor thin margins. And if you don't, for example, slaughter a pig at 300 pounds, if it gains any weight after that, it becomes unsaleable. So
Yes.
that's why you have all of these pig farms where they're saying we're going to have to just slaughter all these pigs. If we can't get them to a slaughterhouse and get them processed, we're just going to have to lose them all because the meat becomes useless after they gain a certain amount of weight. And the same thing is true with cattle. And so it's a real serious issue. And of course, uh, Mike Elmore brought up the fact that the meat packing industry, and I've studied this extensively actually also, the meat packing industry used to be a very unionized industry, and American workers made very good wages to work in that business. And it's a difficult business, it's a difficult job. It's a dangerous job. And so what the meat packers did was they moved out of cities, they moved into countries, into the country, away from the prying eyes of union bosses and stuff. And then they went non-union and began hiring illegal aliens and refugees. And so now they do it for $8 an hour. We pay a lot less for our meat and our poultry as a result, but they never considered the long-term ramifications. You and I, people like us, have seen the long-term ramifications when you get people who are not really equipped to be doing those kinds of jobs, people that have serious hygiene issues, people have a difficult time following directions. And so now look what we have. We have these massive COVID outbreaks in all of these packing plants.
Right.
Because these people are unable to practice any kind of distancing. And of course, that sort of goes with the job. So in a lot of ways, they don't have any choice about it. But by the same token, I guarantee you, things would be a lot different if we still had American workers in those fields making decent money. And, you know, I'm not a union guy by any means, but this is one industry that convinced me where a unionized American workforce would be eons better, and I would pay twice what I pay now for a good steak in order to see that happen. I really would, because all of the other issues that we come across with refugees and illegal aliens, it's just, I mean, you and I both know it. I wrote a whole book about it. All the other ancillary problems they create, and crime and language issues, cultural clashes, and all these things that never existed in our country and now are daily occurrences. And it's just awful. We traded a lot just so that meat packers could get cheap labor. And by the same token, that's just a different side, different symptom of the same problem, which is reflected by our trading with China. You know, all of those companies said, "Oh, let's take advantage of the cheap, almost virtually slave labor in China, and send all our manufacturing capability over there, get all our products produced over there, and we can make a huge boon in profits. Profit margins will go up because we're paying, you know, 10 cents on a dollar for the labor, if that." And yes, and in the short term, that brought us all Walmart prices for a lot of really good products. But now what happens? Now what happens? We gave them our manufacturing capability. We gave them our distribution networks, our marketing capability. We gave them the know-how to create assembly lines, which they never knew how to do before. We gave them high technology. And then they learned all that stuff and then began making knockoffs. So those same companies that sent their manufacturing capability over there are now facing competition from cheaper Chinese products. So they're going to lose anyway. And it was all on our dollar. The Chinese didn't provide anything for those investments. And so it really, you know, when you look at it, the whole thing from 30,000 feet is pretty damn stupid. Pretty damn stupid. And it was facilitated largely by President Bill Clinton, to some extent by President H.W. Bush. George Bush kind of sleepwalked through it all.
Right.
And then President Obama turbocharged it.
Turbocharged it, definitely.
So
the concept of refugees and
I'm talking about
human trafficking,
China trade also.
Bringing folks to Minnesota, and we're facing that now, perhaps in our nursing home crisis as well. We'll see as that unfolds where that's going. But there is a massive problem in our hospitals, nursing homes, our assisted facilities, where people are living with persons. You know, there is a definite question mark over the whole Minnesota State Health and Human Services corporation, if you will, run by the state. Is the nanny state the future that we really want for our people, or do we want people who from the community who respect our seniors and respect our elders for the value that they gave to our community, and that we love them because they are someone we recognize as our grandmother, our grandfather?
Sure.
It's a tremendous the leftists find ways to get between communities and disrupt the ties and connections that exist in communities naturally. So, talking about these meat processing plants as well reminds me of so many anecdotal stories and stories that are carried on in the press about what's happening with Genio and the turkey farmers in Wilmer and Kandiyohi County, the meat processing plants are facing extraordinary challenges. People are working shoulder to shoulder, and as they do that uh, terrible and necessary work of culling the animals, they are spreading the COVID-19 virus amongst themselves. So the counties in Minnesota, which have the highest concentrations of COVID-19 as a disease modality, are the same counties that have these influxes of foreign laborers. And there's one plant that has as many as 95 cases of COVID-19 in Minnesota. I would have to consult actual statistics to be completely accurate. But it's just tremendous. In Minnesota, we're facing the collapse of the meat production industry in Minnesota. Chicken, pork, and also dairy. The dairy industry is being threatened as well. So we're looking at meat shortages in the United States of America. Is this something that was by design? I don't wish to go into the conspiracy theory land, but we have to wonder.
Oh. Well, it was definitely, I think that it's a wake-up call for a lot of people, and I think we're more victims of our own lackadaisical attitudes than any conspiracy theory. I mean, the meat industry, the folks that are actually in the industry are aware of these things, but nobody else gives a damn because they're not affected by it. And that goes for our legislators too. They can't be bothered with somebody unless that issue is, somebody's put a blowtorch to their rear ends, then they might notice. And but so a lot of it's just laziness, carelessness, ignorance, stupidity. But that being said, the radical left is exploiting this crisis for everything it's worth, and they would be happy to see our entire economy collapse. They would be thrilled because, after all, that's what they've been trying to accomplish for 100 years, as I have talked about endlessly in presentations, some of which you've been at, all around the country, in my books, in my articles. This is something that it's their goal. And so here they are given an opportunity on a silver platter to just make hay with everything. I mean, we with the COVID crisis, almost something like half of the deaths are people in nursing homes.
Right.
Why haven't we figured out that those people need to be kept safe, that some kind of extraordinary measures need to be taken to isolate them and to get them the service they need, but leave everything else open? Because, for example, hospitals are closing because they can't get patients for the usual procedures that they do. And that's crazy. Hospitals are closing. All they have open is the COVID ward. And so the whole thing is just, to me, it's nuts. Now, I do know, for example, here in Maryland, and this is crazy, the average nurse or health practitioner working on a particular COVID patient in the hospital goes through 60 gowns and 60 masks a day.
Wow.
60. Every time they go in the room, they have to put on a new gown and a new mask. They come out, take it off, they throw it away, and then they have to get another one. So despite the so-called millions of masks and things being made for the Trump administration, there's a shortage. And so their problem isn't that there's plenty of beds and they could put the staff to work, but they don't have the gowns and the masks to keep the staff and the patients safe while they're working on them.
There's a lot of anecdotal evidence in Minnesota as well about what's occurring in the hospitals. You know, people share stories, travelers' news. It's not information that is reported in newspapers or on television or in the media, but there's a lot of information exchanged between may I say, working class people who walk into a situation and they share a story or an anecdote about how coronavirus was spread inside a nursing home. And I don't want to mention, I can't mention, probably for legal reasons, some of the hospital systems or nursing homes that I'm referring to, but still, people are aware of unclean practices. May I say, I could go as far as saying unclean practices that are occurring, or people whose spouses have tested positive for coronavirus, and that other spouse is working inside a hospital, and then that spouse in the hospital doesn't share that their other spouse is positive, and so I can't go any further, but a lot of information is available out there. But
a lot of ethically challenged people in that community.
Ethically challenged people, I like that expression because it's a very kind way of putting it. Yes, that, and we have to do that. We have to speak in those terms. You know, until
really, that's the best way to put it.
Yes, it is.
With just, you know, they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to go home. They want to make their money, whatever it is. And so, don't tell anybody. The boss will send you home.
Yeah, right.
Somebody else catches it and die. Oh, well, they were an old lady anyway. What the heck?
Right, because it's inside a nursing home, and one of the seniors in our community here in Minnesota recently shared on a public post to a certain governor in a community, a very large community. She shared that she didn't feel safe in her nursing home environment, and the public areas were dirty and they weren't being cleaned properly. And my heart went out to her because I volunteered in nursing homes. You don't know this about me, Mr. Simpson, but when I was a very young child, my mother took me to nursing homes to volunteer. And we used to do, I used to play my guitar, or push the wheelchairs around for a polka dance, or bring people water. And when I was 5 years old, I met persons in 1970 who lived in the previous century. So they were born in the 1800s.
Sure.
In 1970. And I carry that with me because that's a tremendous privilege for me to have experienced contact with a community's elders.
Yeah.
And so there's that affection and love that's transmitted from generation to generation. And I just feel like we dropped the torch a little bit on this COVID-19 virus.
Big time. We've lost a lot of people, and most of them are elderly.
Yeah. There's a little bit of mourning involved there, and a little bit of understanding that our communities, shall I say, our communities, traditionalists, if you will, we're sort of suddenly a broad swathe of them were done away with. And then I suddenly made the connection with Mao's Cultural Revolution, in which Mao, as a communist policy, decided to instigate an eradication of all things ancient and elderly.
Yep. And, in a certain sense, that's what's happening here. You're getting people who, understand our culture. They understand what our constitutional republic is. They're sort of our institutional memory. If you were going to be a conspiracy theorist, that would be a good place to start, because, these people dying and being wiped out, we're losing our institutional memory. I'm willing to bet any amount of money they're disproportionately conservative, because when you get older, you tend to become wiser, and that makes you conservative. Anyone who's not a liberal when they're 20 isn't, has no heart. Anyone who's not a conservative by the time they're 40 has no brain. So said Winston Churchill. But but it's true. And most of us, we live long enough, the truth starts penetrating and dawning in, if we have any personal honesty and integrity, if we are open-minded at all, and that does not almost ever include the left. They remain steadfastly, willfully ignorant for their entire lives, no matter how old they are, no matter how beat up they get by reality. They've always got another rationalization. But for most of us, the truth begins to filter through, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But for most of us, it does as we mature and get older. And so it's a shame that we're losing that institutional memory almost entirely. It's criminal. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible. And it points up the whole problem with the way this is being handled, as just with basically one size fits all type of application, where and the model that I talked about earlier proves, or shows at least, suggests that in many cases there are many counties that never needed to close and could open right up now with very little, if any, risk.
Do you think this is a push toward acquiring people's property eventually, because they're taking jobs, they're taking money, and then value, and then of course property, in terms of people having to foreclose the businesses?
Right. No, I get you. Like any type of situation like this, the scavengers look for opportunities. And the scavengers in this case, I think, are sometimes big businesses looking to absorb small businesses. And I'm sure you could probably see the same thing with properties. And the trouble is, there's always scavengers in any crisis, and they're waiting for the victim to die so they can fly in and pick its eyeballs, and I believe, yes, I believe that is happening. I don't believe that it was designed to happen, but now that we're in this situation, a lot of companies say, oh, well, it just so happens that, oh, gee, good, my competitor of the last 50 years looks like he's, going into the drink. Hey, why don't I offer him a cheap price? Take his hands, something like that. I'm sure that I know that stuff's going on. So I think it's more opportunistic than pre-planned. That's my view.
Well, I want to thank you for this extensive opportunity to speak with you today, Mr. Simpson. And let's mention again, JimSimpsonForCongress.com. Send him a tip and drop $1 in the hat. if you're capable, or 10 or 20.
20 or 50.
Give him the political handshake, because he's a guy who is giving you a smack on the back to spurn you toward opening the United States again for business and getting everybody back to work, because we don't want to be a nation of people who are making more money sitting at home than we are working. Work is good for the soul.
Yes, it absolutely is. Absolutely is. Well, thanks a lot for having me, Wes. It's been great. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson,
Yes,
and
sir.
Godspeed to you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.